it's rather the concept, not even the concept, but rather the relationship that exists between Brazil and Africa, and which is historical, which is social, cultural, artistic, religious, culinary, musical, and so on. So I really think that somehow uh, those strong connections have to translate also into more collaboration, more exchange, and more intertwining of our practices, be them curatorial, artistic, and so on. So I found it quite wonderful that Video Brazil specifically always tries to, make those routes available to artists, to curators, and so on. So, in that sense, there is a clear South-South dialogue that has to be reestablished or reinforced in a greater way. I mean, there is this. I mean, Brazil has positioned itself as a modern country, looking more towards to the U.S. and looking more towards to Europe. But I think Brazil needs to look more towards Africa and vice versa, because there is much more there that that binds these two territories. So personally, I am curatorially interested into the digestion of history and of black history and of black culture, and the different manifestations that the different influences, political, social, historical, have had on the development of black culture. So I always say Brazil is another African country. So I think identity is an endless theme in artistic expressions. This is such it's a thematic that more or less concerns every single one person. So it will never be passé. I never think that. But at the same time also, I don't believe that it has to take all this big focus that it sometimes takes. I think that not all the works dealing with identity are interesting, but the fact that somehow people are concerned with what they are, where they come from, where are they going, what they represent or how they are represented, and so on. So these are areas of thinking and also of working that are central to specifically so-called non-Western identities. So you will see a lot of identity work by African artists or by Latin-American artists or South Asian artists, Indian artists, and so on. You will see less of it by Western artists as such. So, and territory also. I mean, it goes hand in hand in a certain way, and I think it's a very interesting field, never ending kind of how can you say, well of ideas and possibilities of translation, of those ideas, and it's but I think it should be without pathos, when identity work and they get into too much pathos, then it becomes non-interesting. And also the fact that identity is not static, it's a constantly evolving and changing, and also not only constantly evolving and changing, but it's also multiple, even within one single person. So, and it's not obvious in a sense that it's not because you're black that you're African, or that you're white that you're Western, and so on. So, it's yeah. Since the independences, different African countries have developed different mechanism, different institutions, and different kind of contexts to promote arts and culture. Some successfully, some other less successful. But what is clear is that since at least the mid-1980s, there is a clear collapse of all those kind of progressive systems and institutions and organizations that were established in the early 1960s. And that collapse created a clear void that luckily is being filled in the late years, in the late 10, 15 years, by a new generation of art professionals, be them artists, curators, writers, and so on, that are sort of overtaking the role of, contextualizing ideas, contextualizing culture, contextualizing artistic production, and producing knowledge and producing new discourse. So you cannot. Every country has its own specificity with regards to arts and culture, but in a general sense, there is what I think there is. You put it like Fanon says: every generation has to serve its purpose or betray it. So, and I think there are young art professionals that are trying to serve the purpose of the arts and in Africa. So, and the situation is thriving at some places and not at the others. Dakar, for instance, we have a biennial, clear, but it's also have a very strong past, a very strong history on promoting arts and culture by the former president, and so it's really part of the social fabric of producing and promoting art. In Cameroon, for instance, it's totally different. So, or in the Congo, for instance, or in a troubled area. I mean, South Africa again, it's a whole different kind of setting. But what I can always say, it sounds idealistic and even romantic somehow. I think there is one thing that can never be taken away from Africans, it's creativity. And no matter where, no matter how, no matter in which condition, no matter in which field. So as long as that is a fact, I'm always very hopeful. Wow. Being in juries is always a very, very big burden, because it's a big responsibility. You have the responsibility to not only make a selection and make sure that the selections are right. And it's always very difficult, because any event, all these artists here could deserve a prize. Any event, any biennial, of course, the curators are presenting 50, 60, 80 great works. And so in a jury, you basically, you will always have to strike a balance between certain issues, like gender is one, generation is one, of course, practice is one, and background is another. So it's we try to sort of be equal in the background of all these criteria. And I'm absolutely happy with the result, extremely happy actually with the result. And you'll find out in tomorrow.